Hello, David Clarke here from DVC Training. Just a quick video this time, which is a little bit late, about a recent update that we had with EDIUS. Actually filming this on 20th of June, but this came out a couple of weeks ago, and I just hadn't got around to doing a video. There was a nice little change here, thought it's worth mentioning. So, for a start, what changes were there in the most recent versions of EDIUS? The major change is to do with H.264 encoding. I got quite a few people getting confused by reading the stuff online about this, thinking it was to do with playback. But no, this is all to do with actually making files at the end of it, nothing to do with the playback. So EDIUS 11 can use the nVidia card and QuickSync to actually help playback footage and also help encode footage. And the playback stuff, you go up to the settings, system settings, and under the H.264 and H.265 files, so AVCHD is H.264, HEVC is H.265. You can see there's a use hardware decoder tick box, and that will either be using QuickSync or the nVidia, depending on what you've got. I talked about that and this thing, video rendering and playback, when it was added in, I think it was 11.1. It's not to do with that at all, and that's what people have got confused about. It's actually completely to do with export. So I'm going to ignore that, and instead I'm going to go print file. And the major change is they have revamped the nVidia encoder. So when you make H.264 and H.265, you've got three options. You can use the processor to do the work. You can use Intel QuickSync, which is something that's only built into Intel processors, or you can use the nVidia card. Of course, this is with EDIUS 11. Didn't used to do this in older versions. You've been able to use QuickSync for ages. They only introduced the nVidia encoding in EDIUS 10. Now in EDIUS 11, they revamped it a bit to make it work better and use features which are on newer graphics cards. This particular machine happens to be nice and up to date. So it is an i9 Ultra-Core 285, and it's also got an nVidia 5060 Ti. So very up to date machine, nice and powerful. There's some new stuff they've put into the 5 series or the 50 series of graphics cards, and the new encoder will take advantage of that, whereas it wouldn't on the previous one. It also works a bit better and a bit faster. So when you go to export either H.264 or H.265, you'll notice in particular, you used to either choose that one to do an MPEG-4 file, or that one if you wanted to use nVidia to make the file. Now the advantage of a hardware encoder is it's going to be quicker. If you start using the software, it depends on how good your processor is as to how long it's going to take. On this nice Intel 285, if I'm doing high definition, I actually find using just the processor, making H.264, is actually pretty much as fast as using the hardware. It's slower if I start making H.265. H.265 is harder work. It's more complicated, it's more advanced, it's harder work to both playback and make. Of course, I am using a processor which came out towards the end of 2024. If you've got one from a few years ago, you might find it totally different. You might find the hardware is actually considerably faster than your software. And of course, it's quite easy to upgrade the graphics card. It's less easy to upgrade the processor. So it used to be you either choose that, and this one would do software or QuickSync, or you choose that and it would do nVidia. They've left this one in here, in case some people liked it, and they've put the word obsolete on it. But actually, this is what you're going to use 99% of the time to make H.264. So you click on that, you go to export, and then here you have all the usual settings for your bit rates and whether it's constant bit rate or variable bit rate and the audio and all that sort of stuff. But it's mainly this stuff down here, encoder. This is the big addition. Now you choose whether you're using software, Intel or nVidia. Obviously, if you don't have Intel, it won't show up there in the list. With these things, nVidia does it very quickly and I think is better quality than QuickSync for lower bit rates. And I think the software is actually really good if you're going down to lower bit rates. So if you're trying to squeeze the file up to make it as small as possible but still look good, I think the software actually does a very good job on that. And obviously you come in here and you just choose one. There is an auto. I'm always a fiddler, so I've actually not used auto. I've always chosen one of those, and I tend to either choose software or nVidia. I haven't really sat down to compare it 100% and encode the same thing 3 different ways and have a look at it and see what's better. What I have been doing really is either just using that or using that and being very happy with the results. And that's really the big change. They've revamped the nVidia encoder so it's better, and they've put the choice in here. It makes a lot more sense. You would go print file, you choose that, export, and then decide whether it's between hardware or software. Whereas before, there used to be a little tick box in here that said use hardware, but the only option was it would use QuickSync, and if you wanted to use nVidia, you'd have to go back. So it kind of makes sense, put it all in one place, and at the same time revamp it so it works a bit better. With H.265, same thing, you've got an obsolete one and a not obsolete one. You go to export on that, and again you get software, Intel and nVidia. Now, like I said, if I'm using a really up-to-date processor and I'm doing high definition H.264, I find the software is fast enough for me. It's when I start to do 4Ks, when I start to do H.265, that gets quite slow, and it's quite nice to use one of the others. So I've got a bunch of random clips here on the timeline. I've got 2 minutes 33 seconds, a nice totally random length timeline. Who is this guy? Then I am going to try making that up into H.265, because that's the one that works the hardest. Choose this, export, let me choose software and save, and then at the same time let me print to file, export, and choose nVidia. And just for a laugh, let's also choose QuickSync. Of course, this being EDIUS 11, everything is going on in the background, so let's go to the job monitor, and you can see here, yep, I've got this one's busy chundering away. It's got to what, 67%, so it's not doing too badly. I'll just let those three run through, and I'll tell you how long each one of them took. Of course, whilst it's doing that, I can go off and do something else. So just looking at my results here, the QuickSync one actually took 2 minutes 27 seconds. If you look at the software one, it actually did it faster. So this is H.265 high definition. Obviously the times get longer for 4K. The software one, that one took 1 minute and 17 seconds. But the nVidia is the clear winner here. It took 39 seconds to make this timeline up. You know, this is a high definition timeline, just with some random clips on it. This is not 4K, so imagine if it's 4K, it's going to be longer. There's definitely a speed advantage to nVidia over the software on this, which is the best Intel processor we have at the moment, and also better than QuickSync. One thing you do have to be careful with these graphics cards is that there are limitations depending on what graphics card you've got. The 5000 series nVidia cards can do different formats that the 4000 and the 3000 and the 2000 can't do. So you might find that, for example, if you're using like a 1060, which is a perfectly good graphics card and was a really good one when it came out, you can't do IBP frames, you can't do 10-bit, you can't do something else. You know, there's lots of different limitations, so you do have to find out what your graphics card can actually do, and it will vary as to how fast they are depending what they are. You know, this is a nice 5060 Ti, 16 gigabyte, which is a graphics card that's only come out in the last couple of months. That's going to be faster than a 1060 or a 2060. So first of all, you'll need to check what they can do to make sure it does the kind of format that you want. And this is the same with QuickSync. What QuickSync can do will vary depending on what processor you've got. So as they improve the processors, they put more abilities into the QuickSync. Same goes for the playback. So you might find that even though you've got QuickSync, even though you've got nVidia, you put some fancy H.265 stuff on the timeline and it's a pig to play back, and you find out it's not using the processor to do anything. That's because your processor and your graphics card are old and therefore they can't play back that type of footage. I mean, particularly things like 10-bit footage, sometimes some of them don't do. If you want to see a list of what various nVidia graphics cards can do, then go to this page and I'll link to it in the description. You can see a list of the different formats they can encode and decode. If you click on that, I have to say I do find the table clear as mud. You have a whole list of different graphics cards down here. So first of all, you find your graphics cards with the later ones towards the bottom. And then across here, you have what it can actually decode for you. So this will tell you what it can decode. If I go to this one, it'll tell me what it can make or encode. But of course, you find your graphics card and you can't tell what these columns are because the headings for the columns are at the top and it doesn't even show all of them. So you have to go down to the bottom. Then you have to move across so you can see the columns. Now, what the hell? Which was my graphics card? Oh, I don't know. So yeah, clear as mud, but it's all there if you care to spend ages decoding it. I have to admit, I tend to just choose the encoder and let it get on with it. If something isn't working fast enough and I'm thinking, well, is it using the hardware or not? Rather than looking at this table, what I'll do is I'll bring up Task Manager, I'll go to the Performance tab, which is the second one, and I'll look down here at what graphics card is being used. So I've got here my nVidia graphics card and my Intel graphics card, and at the top the processor. So you look at those and you'll find out which one is being used for most of the work. When you're using the nVidia card, it's probably about 50-60%, it's never 100%. But if that's hardly being used and it's 100% CPU, you know it's not using the nVidia. That's probably why it's slow. Or you can tell whether it's using the Intel. The Intel graphics card being the QuickSync part of the processor. I'd look at that rather than looking at this table, because I just find that table's fairly useless, to be perfectly honest. The main takeaway is later graphics cards do more different formats than earlier graphics cards. So if something isn't being accelerated by the graphics card, it's probably that your graphics card doesn't happen to do that particular format. You know, you're filming in 10-bit H.264, it doesn't happen to do that. A lot of the old ones don't. Looking at all this there, I've been calling these 5 series, which are the latest graphics cards, 5th generation. According to nVidia, they're 9th generation. Why do you put a 5 in the front? I don't know. Anyway, 5 series graphics cards are the latest. That's what I'm using in this system. Certainly in this test, the nVidia beats the other two, and they all pretty much look the same. So what I really like about the software one is it's pretty good at doing lower bit rates. When I encoded this lot, I just let it do the settings that it actually had in there in the first place. You know, I just chose this, set export, and I let it choose these settings. If I was to drop this down a lot to 5, 6, 7 megabytes or something, I think the software still does a better job than the others, but I'd need to play with it and try it to find out. If you want to see the full list of all the changes in this version, just go onto the Grass Valley forums, which you can see here on this thread, which I'll link to in the description. As you can see, it's mainly about the nVidia hardware encoding. This is the bit here which confused people, because use hardware is still there when you look at decoding, it's just not there on encoding. If you want to download it, just use the Grass Valley setup application. So just double click on this thing and it'll bring up the application, which will then update it for you. Or you can use the link which is on this thread here to take you to EDIUS World. The difference is that the Grass Valley setup app will check everything, so all the extra plugins, whereas this link here will just give you a link to downloading EDIUS itself. But if for some reason this isn't working, you can always get it through that. And like you can see here, I've just run this and it's decided there is actually a new version of Vitascene available for me, which I wouldn't have found out if I'd used that. And of course, all you do is just tick it and say, get on with it, and it'll install it for you. Final thing worth mentioning is this line. Make sure your nVidia driver is 570 or later. There has been a bit of a change on the nVidia drivers later, and it's not just EDIUS that wants later ones. Resolve does, Topaz does as well. Normally Windows updates these for you, but doesn't always put in the absolute latest ones. So it might say when you try to install this update that you'll need to update your nVidia drivers first. Simplest way I find is just to go to the nVidia wipe set and look for them. So I'll go to nVidia, GeForce drivers, assuming you have a GeForce graphics card, which are the most common. You can do an automatic driver update and let it do it for you. I always tend to come in here and pick out my graphics card. So in this case, I've got a GeForce card, which is a 50 series. And in this machine, it is a 5060 Ti. I'm on Windows 11. And then I'd say search. Then it comes up with a bunch of drivers. They have these two versions, studio drivers and game ready drivers. The studio drivers are meant to be designed for stuff like video editing and AI upscaling and that kind of thing, whereas the game ones, unsurprisingly, are designed for games, and people do say these ones are a little bit more reliable, so I always go for the studio drivers. Literally, I'll choose the latest one, get download now, and then eventually it downloads it, and then you just run the installer and install it. That's how I always update my nVidia drivers anyway. And I did happen to notice, nothing to do with EDIUS, but with Topaz, which obviously I use for AI upscaling, with Topaz, which really hammers the graphics card, actually just going to these latest drivers, 576.8 over the ones I had before, which I think was 576.2. It did increase speed slightly, like about 10% or so. So I always like to keep up to date on those, but particularly for my other programs, not EDIUS. Normally is quite happy, but in this case, EDIUS does say update your drivers. So if Windows hasn't done it for you, just pop to nVidia and get them. In my next video, which will come out in a couple of days, I am going to just have a quick look at the BAT server. I've done a few videos on the BAT server before. It's just got a bit easier to install and a bit simpler, so I just wanted to do a quick summary of that. So my next video on that will be out in a couple of days. Anyway, hope you found this video useful. Obviously, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. That always helps me a little bit. If you need more information about me, visit the website www.dvctraining.co.uk or email me, david@dvctraining.co.uk. Hope you found this information useful, and I'll see you next time.